Snowdrops are the first flower to emerge after winter, so they give us enormous pleasure, and a snowdrop walk or a snowdrop day is the sign of the garden visiting season opening, even if only for one day. So I'm here at Doddington Place Gardens with Lucy Adams, the head gardener, to find out how we can grow snowdrops and if there are any problems or pests or diseases, and how we could even create a little mini snowdrop walk of our own. It's Alexandra here from the Middle-Sized Garden YouTube channel and blog. So Lucy, tell me how you plant snowdrops.
So we plant them generally in the green, so that will be just after they're flowering, before the leaves start to die, and we tend to divide them and then just dot them around, and that way we find it increases the amount of snowdrops quickly. You can also buy them as bulbs, and then you plant them between September and November.
People seem to think that planting them in the green, which is with the leaves on, is better than planting them as bulbs. Have you got a view on that?
I've generally only planted them in the green, but there is no reason why you can't plant them as bulbs. I just think it generally seems to be they establish quicker in the green. And
tell us how you've created the snowdrop walk around Doddington.
It's been a sort of labour of love over many years. When Amicia first came here, Mrs Oilfield, she started, there was hardly any snowdrops, and she started buying them from Cambo and putting them in places where they would have a nice drift effect, and then hoping to, in long term, it's a very long term design plan for them to bulk up like you see in some places. But you generally want them in more of a partial woodland setting, because they're brilliant for in the winter when the trees have lost their leaves, and that's the first part of the spring. They will grow through because they want that partial sun, dappled sun, but yeah, especially under a nice ornamental deciduous tree.
Yes, so they're actually ideal for shade planting.
They are ideal for planting under trees, but not, you don't want them under an evergreen, so you wouldn't want them in complete shade all year round, but that sort of winter where you've got the light coming through under the deciduous canopy, that's perfect.
And how long does it take them to spread?
Okay, so they will spread a little bit every year. They're not the quickest to bulk up, but once they like where they are, then they do generally bulk up quite quickly.
And when you're choosing snowdrops, is there any particular reason why you would choose one type over another? Are there types that are particularly good for certain situations?
I would generally go for a mix of the native snowdrops. I mean, you get so many different kinds of snowdrops. You can be a complete fanatic about snowdrops and have really beautiful, very rare ones, but generally here we will go for a mixed variety, and then you've got lots of different heights and different flower heads.
And in terms of actually planting them,
yeah.
Can you go through, how deep they should be, whether you need to water them, etc.?
Well, if you're planting them in the green, then you will generally plant them. You'll be able to generally see on the bulb where they were planted in the soil originally. So you want to plant them that deep. It's usually a couple of bulbs depth. And you will want to water them in when they're in the green. And when they're establishing, you might want to just put a mark in where you've put your bulbs. So if you had a really dry, hot summer, you want to water over that area. But if you're planting them in the winter, generally you won't have to water them in because they'll be in a dormant state, and we're getting much, obviously, wetter winters now.
So do you have to fertilise snowdrops at all?
We never fertilise ours. If you choose the right soil conditions, then you should be fine.
And presumably also you keep nourishing your soil with well-rotted compost or leaf
Well,
mould
if you choose a woodland setting, then you should have a nice sort of leaf mulch layer, so the organic matter will be broken down for you by worms and things throughout the year, and that brings quite a nutritious soil anyhow. Generally, if you can leave a few leaves around, if you've got that sort of woodland garden bit in your borders, then you will recreate that soil for yourself without having to put in any extra work.
So if you're putting down a mulch, such as bark, gravel, compost, etc., will the snowdrops grow through it?
Yeah, snowdrops can grow through a lot. In the rock garden we have snowdrops in a more gravelly situation. So we have a layer of sort of hardcore underneath, and then we have a big deep layer of sand, and then the horticultural grit, and then Obviously, over time, it also mixes with soil particles and things like that, and they'll grow up through that absolutely fine.
And what do you plant with snowdrops?
Oh, there's so many. As we can see round us, we've got Eranthus, hellebores, the early flowering crocus types. I think that the white hellebores especially, and the primulas as well.
Obviously the bulbs are taking up space, which you might be wanting for plants later on. Do you sort of dig snowdrops up at the end, or do you just leave them in to multiply?
I leave them in. Leave them in to multiply, just let the leaves die back. It happens quite quickly, and then it won't take long before your bulb be tidy. The only thing I'd say, if you are limited on space, you might just want some kind of marker of where those bulbs are, so you don't keep digging them up if you're planting annuals or other things in that area.
Yes, I think that's probably true, because I think I've lost quite a few snowdrops by doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, by just not marking them and then digging them up. And
Well, in the summer months, you just don't know where they are.
Yeah.
Yep. It doesn't need to be anything big, just some kind of stick, something that you know what that means.
And if you were thinking of making a snowdrop walk, you know, I'm thinking about a middle-sized garden, so it's not going to be a very long walk.
Yeah.
But how would you want to design it?
The difficult thing with any bulb planting is to plant naturalistically, because you won't get that glade walk if you set out your bulbs in a geometric shape. So you have to be very ruthless broadcasting your bulbs and then planting them where they lay. Also have some which you plant in a bundle, some which you can plant more individually, so you get that sort of naturalistic look. And you want drifts of them really, rather than just them regimented up the side of a path. I think that looks more natural myself.
Yeah. In terms of care and maintenance, snowdrops seem to be very low maintenance. I mean, do you have to do any cutting back or fertilising or anything once they're in the ground?
No, they're very low maintenance for us. But generally, I think pots are the only place where you may have to do a bit of fertilising, keep them watered.
So water if it's particularly dry after planting.
Yes.
Otherwise, don't let it worry you at all.
Exactly.
And you don't have to deadhead the flowers.
Nope.
Which is lovely considering they're so tiny.
Yeah.
And you said pots, so snowdrops grow well in pots, do they? What would you need to know about growing snowdrops
Just
in
make
pots?
sure that it's a free draining soil. You don't want sort of a heavy soil in there. Like snowdrops wouldn't like a really heavy clay. So you need to have that sort of well draining moist soil that you would in a woodland setting.
Troubleshooting some pests. What sort of pests do snowdrops
I mean,
have?
generally snowdrops aren't particularly bothered by a huge amount of pests, because their leaves and bulbs are toxic to things like deer and rabbits. They'll just leave them alone. And there is a narcissus fly that will attack the bulbs of snowdrops, and they generally attack in the summer months because they're attracted to the smell of the leaves rotting down, and they will burrow. The fly will lay its eggs near, and then when the grub emerges, it will burrow across. And I've been told that if you scrape away the soil, scrape around the soil to interrupt those burrows, that helps with that. But when you're doing it on a mass scale like woodlands and things like that, then it's very difficult to
protect individual
ones, because you can protect them with mesh. I know that moles can be a problem if you have moles in your garden, because they can go underneath them and push the bulbs out. But then it's just a case of having just to replant them.
And you mentioned toxic, so should one worry about pets and children?
Generally, as long as the bulbs are in the ground, they won't touch them. I mean, obviously, if you've got a very adventurous child, then you might want to make them aware that they're not to go digging them round. But because when they're flowering and then they die back quite quickly, the bulbs aren't sort of sitting around obvious where they are. But I've never known any of our dogs or anything to try and dig them up and eat them.
Are there any sort of best varieties of snowdrops for beginners?
Nivalis.
Nivalis.
Yeah, I would start with that one. It's probably the easiest one to get going.
And if someone finds that they can't grow snowdrops, what would you think that would be the problem?
It's probably your soil type. If you have a really heavy clay, or you have a really garden that bakes in the summer, where they can't have that little bit of partial shade, or the soil sits wet, really wet over winter, and it will be too much water or not enough water that's sitting in your soil. If your garden gets baked in the summer, then they're probably not going to particularly like that, because they are a woodland edge plant.
Yeah.
I think just the joy that snowdrops bring at this time of year, when there's so little going on in the garden, just that splashes of white, I think it just gives your heart a little bit of a lift that you know you're coming into the growing season. And I don't know many people who walk past drifter snowdrops without feeling something. Nostalgia or just happiness seeing the life that's starting again in the garden.
Well, of course, once the snowdrops are over, you've got daffodils and tulips, and we've got a wonderful how to grow a stunning, glorious display of tulips video. So don't miss that, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.